And if you've never stood at the foot of these things, it's pretty impressive. They a couple of 100 feet high. And it's what's interesting, they're at the 4,000 foot level. If you look at the USGS map, everything else is 38 and 3,900 feet, and then these break the 4,000 foot mark. And when you walk between the rocks, in between two of them, there's this hollow spot where you can see the harder rock inside. I've heard this nickname by people. They call it, have you seen the altar? So that's what one of the things I've heard that called. Did that jump? There's also a large rock that has some unusual mortars in it. Like some of them are mortars in mortars. And from what Ray had looked at, he doesn't know that this is really seen anywhere else. So we don't know what the significance of it is, what it means. There's quite a few of them on one rock, large piece. And there's another one, a little closer up. And it just shot right down in. That was a large mortar. So what's been explained to me is, I kept thinking, well, as you go along, they get bigger as you go. And one of the archaeologists said, no, I don't think so. He said, I think they took hard stone and ground these the size they wanted them. Because if they were grinding out while you're grinding your grain, you'd have rock and you'd feel the grit. And he said, so normally the pestles were round and done in such a way that they wouldn't get grindings in the meal or whatever it was that they were grinding up. So we're driving down the trail. We keep noticing real close to Walking Rocks this great big rock with tufts up on it. So you learn when you're walking around and you see a rock and you see tall grass, maybe because there's deeper ground. So you take a trowel and you scrape down, and you can find the mortars by that. But what's it doing up about 7 or 8 feet? So we ended up going to lunch, grabbing a ladder, bringing the ladder back, going up on top, and we didn't find nothing. But my Jeep had started losing the emergency brake, and we were worried about rolling off. So we go over, and I'm looking for a rock, and Ray goes, hey Rodger, look at this. And there was a rock in the edge of the road, and there was 3 mortars. Within 45 minutes, we'd found 27 rocks that had mortars that we were not aware of. So we had to go back and spend a whole afternoon doing drawings, doing site reports, and getting all that cataloged. That shows just some of the mortars we found in that site. You know, little off topic here, but I mentioned lunch, so I just thought of something. One of the best parts is there was 3 of us going up. We always spent at least 3 nights, so we always saw who could outdo each other for dinner and make a better dinner. So we ate very, very well. Yeah, and there's another. Did I have a label on that previous one? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, this is Los Gatos Park. We've got 2 slides in here from Los Gatos Park. And I guess there's quite a bit more up there that I'm not aware of. I've heard a lot of people talk. The whole canyon is full of stuff. And this is the backside of a rock on the upper level. You'd walk right by it and never know that any of the cupola art was on the backside. This, I labeled the crossroads of 2 trails. There's a couple of ways actually maybe 3 of the easiest ways to get up to this area. One of them would be come up from Los Gatos Canyon and get up on top. One of them probably from Positioné. They probably came up, if you know where the intersection where 33 and 198 split, like you're going to Harris Ranch. There's evidence of it. There's a ridge there that comes down very slowly. And you can take that walk up and walk up past where the big repeater stations are and walk across in front of this. That trail is not what it looks like. It looks like it does this. What it does is this. So you go clean to the bottom. We went up there on a day that they thought it was going to be 80-something degrees, and it peaked just under 100. So we hadn't carried enough water. Ray almost blacked out before we got to the Jeep. He grabbed 2 waters and poured over his head, and he said, I think I'm done for the day. Let's see what we want to do. We had another site we were going to go to. And I said, I've got a better site than that. I know a really good Mexican restaurant with carne asada and Corona beer. And we spent 2 hours there. We were done for the day. And then I'm actually on the trail coming through Donut Rock. And so there's another trail that comes over, like I said, from Black Mountain, which you come over from the repeater station. And then there's a fork. If you follow, the Donut Rock Trail could split. You could actually end up with it down at Palmer and Derrick, and it turns and goes back into Los Gatos Canyon. Now, this boy has a lot skinnier then. What happened? This Ray Iddings and myself in front of a petroglyph panel. And you notice the crack and the markings? This thing is just full of carvings. This is a fairly significant rock panel. It was believed to be a winter solstice site, and I met Ray and we were talking, and he was telling me, and he was explaining where Donut Rock was. And I was telling him, no, it's not there. And in the course of the conversation, he goes, well, it's pretty well documented. Why, have you been there? And I said, yes, I have. And he goes, really? So he pulls out a topo, and I show him where it is, and he goes, this rock I just showed you, petroglyph panel, is based on Donut Rock being somewhere else, and someone triangulated something and said that's a winter solstice site, and they've been going up there on winter solstice, and nothing appears. So if what you're saying right, it's a summer solstice site. So why don't we go up on summer solstice when the sun comes up and film it? So we did. And you can see, as from summer to winter solstice, the sunlight will come up in a different place back and forth. And it'll show the shadow different on that rock. So you can, on summer solstice, and only a couple days before and after, the light will shine down in that crack. And that's significant to other rocks in the United States. If they find something like that, they see it as spiritually significant. It's also not real far from water. So, you saw that, the last slide I showed with the sun over that cliff, that's on the east. This is looking to the west, so when you're waiting for the sunlight to appear, it's like a sundial. You're watching the shadow come down. So it just doesn't slowly get light, it actually comes across like a curtain coming down. And on summer solstice, the light went right down in the crack. There's a better picture of it. I don't know how much you can see, but I'll be in the way. Do you see all the dots? And anthropomorphic men, there's a series of dots right in here. There's 3 lines, and a shadow drops across those lines at, one of them is winter solstice, one of them is summer solstice, and the spring and fall equinox is in the same place. I've got a question. This panel, the way the light goes in and the way these shadows are off a little bit. And so Ray went and did some calculations and said if you would turn the clock back 6,000 years, the earth has a wobble. And you calculate that, that would all line up. So is it 6,000 years old? Or has the whole mountain just moved from earthquakes? You know, who knows? But what I find interesting is as the shadow goes across these dots, they hit the center of every dot every hour. So it divides the day up into 24 pieces. And this is way before they ever met any Europeans. Why did they divide it up 24 hours a day, and why did we divide it up 24 hours a day? And where did all this come from? Yeah, well, and you study there's a lot of things found this way all over the world. Almost as though somebody was able to travel around it sometime and explain and share things. We've made many trips into this. You see anything in that crack? Okay, that is happening during spring and fall equinox in the afternoon. Only happens in one other rock setting in the northern United States, and that was at Chaco Canyon, and that one fell down. So this is very unique. And there it gives a dagger light on the ground. Now what frustrates me is if you we're given a little latitude. I became a site observer with a BLM. I went through some training. I got sponsored. Someone vouched for me. I had to go down to Barstow to go to school. And they gave me this site as like a site steward, kind of like neighborhood watch. You're looking to protect it. So we can do a little bit more, but we're not allowed to excavate. So what's under this dirt? So we went up and it had been raining. So Ray and I are talking, how much violation would it be if I've got some shish kebab skewers. And I learned to take those in case you left a marking with something that would decompose. So if you left something there, it'd be gone in a while. So we went in and we found within a couple of inches, about 14 inches, a whole lot of rock all the same depth. So I can't believe there's not a marking. But in order to excavate that, you'd have to fill out a report. You'd have to have several archaeologists come in. You'd have to raise money to put this dirt in storage for an eternity. So we're looking then $20,000 or $30,000 minimum to pull the dirt out of the ground. So we don't know what's underneath it. I'd sure like to.
We won't tell.
Yeah.
Shovel.
I can't tell you how many times I've sat at home thinking that. But, so that's only 2 sites in North America, north of the Mexican border, is this known to happen. So we got 4 seasons to show on this calendar. Now, this guy named Hugo. Linda, were you up there when there was a bunch of us up there that day?
Yes, I was.
And he's telling us a story about 2 other places in California that have something kind of significant. And they show this skull of a man with his big nose, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and it sounds like he's been hitting the bottle just one too many times. And we've never stayed here till noon on summer solstice. So we stayed. Oh my goodness, look what shows up. So we did go up on the rock. We went up the backside, it kind of rounds over. And he told us we might see something. We saw evidence. They'd taken hard stone and made wedges, and you could see where they drove them in and shaped the top of this rock. So it's worn, but you see the slight indentation, like where it was compressed, and they hit it with another big heavy rock, and they shaped the top of that so the shadows would go across the face of that rock like they did, and this face would show up. So we're looking at this petroglyph panel, and they've been trying to figure out how do people get down there. And so the thought was, petroglyph panel's down over here, right up there. Yeah. They thought they probably crawled up the wall of this thing. And I'm riding along in my Jeep one day, and I'd gone back for something, and I just stopped and looked, and I got, well, look at that. You've got an inclined plane the width of a football field to walk this nice gradual slope, and here's one of the trails. Why would you go up a sheer rock wall? Why would they go the easy route? And I kept getting told, well, you don't understand, they get around a lot better than we do. But I thought, yeah, but I thought they were smarter than that. You know, this is so simple and so easy. So I hike up it, and find this trail. So what's unique, this trail's a different width. It's wider than the trail that the cattle were running on, and the ground's really hard. So I go back with those skewers, and I cannot puncture the ground. It's almost like it's stone, but it's dirt. So I go back everywhere else the cattle are running, and it's packed a little bit, but the skewer will go right down in it. So then we get to look at, and how long did it take that tree to grow if cattle were running underneath it? How long did it take that tree to grow down and have substantial limbs that close to the ground? So we figured it's been there a while. So I went back up the next day and started walking circles, looking for evidence the Indians had been there. And there's a piece of a nail clipper. This is small. Piece is about that long. So I've got more photographs somewhere of it. I couldn't find them. I carry with me a 35 millimeter and gray cards. Gray cards give you a reflection of true light. So you can use them like a light. And my 35 millimeter's got a super macro, so I can focus down on and I can take an item that big and put it in my entire camera. But the lighting's a problem. So I put it all on there and we take pictures and I send them, and the BLM sends me a note back that there's what they believe is bone scratchings, that this is a cutting tool. You can see microscopic lines across it in places where they took that and used it to maybe skin an animal or cut some meat or... So went back and I got to fill out a linear site report of this being the trail between the 2 points. This is the what's believed to be a spring site. They believe maybe the trees died from too much water. A hydroarchaeologist came in and said he thought there was a spring there, maybe during an earthquake or something, the ground all slept off over it. But we noticed when we were there, it seemed to stay green year round. And it's just, here's another, this is actually down, I think, by the petroglyph site. Yeah, this is around the petroglyph site. This is those, can you see them? Very slight anthropomorphic men in that. It's pretty light, but you can see the legs. The lighting is not real good. We talked about trying to go up there sometime years ago and take some colored lights and try to come across at an angle and see if any of that stuff would stand out. And not far from there, when we started looking on a trail, we thought they were going to walk out maybe 100, 150 yards from the panel. We went up on a cliff and it just dropped off, so they weren't going up there. But Ray's niece went with us, and that's her standing in one of the shelters. She's in 4th grade. So I had her stand up in there so we could get a proportion of how big it was. So that'd be a decent place to curl up and spend the night. So we're going to leave that area. That's Ron Wiltshire. And I've got a couple pictures. This north of Coalinga, up one of the roads, there's another site. And I've driven up and down that road. I've talked to several people, and they had no clue that there were bedrock mortars within 100 feet of the road along the creek. You can see, I'll show you something. We walked the creek. And while we're walking the creek, there's been a major wash come down a rock, and we find 2 pestles in the creek. Normally we don't take things. These have been washed out of their location. And Eric told me, just go ahead and take those and keep them at your house, and we'll have a reference. We don't know exactly where they came from. The creek's got a couple tributaries that come into it, and there's a lot of water up in there, so obviously somebody probably used that as a hunting camp, the Indians at one time. Okay. showed this cabin for a reason. You can see it's had a roof put on it. This is, if you go up Interstate 5 and you go in towards the New Hydra mine, just a few miles before you get in there, this cabin's sitting there. And we were asked to come in and spend 2 days documenting the cabin and see if we can date it. So I spent 4 hours drawing this wall. Literally measured the brick, the distance between the brick, trying to date the style, and then we found in the wall that's eucalyptus. So eucalyptus is imported. It's not native here. That means this was definitely built after eucalyptus was brought in. But the style of the brick, the way the courses are laid, are the way the Indians were taught at the missions. So it still didn't exactly date it, because was this built after they were released from the missions? Or did somebody slip away and that was a good hiding place and they take that technology with them? But we did know that, I'll forget that for a minute. We do know that the Indians were influential in building that cabin. So that was kind of neat.
When was eucalyptus brought in?
What's that?
Do you know when eucalyptus was brought in?
I've looked it up before and I don't remember it now.
Okay, that's fine.
I've been here for quite a while. Here's another site. Some of you may recognize that rock if you go up the Parkfield Road. And there's, you can see the patterns all over the backside. It's all carved up. So there's some of the carvings on that. I think that's right about, that might be my last slide. Yep.
That was some of the Roberts on a wild Saturday night.
What was that?
Some of the Roberts kids on a wild Saturday night.
Okay, could have been, yeah. What's interesting on that rock, Ray, I would never have noticed it. And Ray said, do you notice anything different? And you see a big area of it that drops down is a different color. And if you look through it, you can see a little bit of carving. It looks like that rock was carved and somebody came in and erased it with chisel and carved something new on it. And so what would cause somebody to want to erase somebody else's history? Another question we'll probably never answer. Gordon?
1850s, the Australians brought eucalyptus to California.
Okay. And I thought, wasn't it the 1860s when the Indians were released from the missions?
They were released before that.
Before that? Okay, so then this was probably built after Indians were released with their help. One thing I'll share with you now that you can't see the picture anymore, that one petroglyph panel that's got the 4 seasons, you're the second group only ever to see that. That is locked down, it's tight. We didn't even give the government permission to put that in anywhere that could ever be accessed. It's all on paper copy, locked in a file. And then I think Ray and I have the other 2 copies of it. So I was given permission to use my judgment if I wanted to show it, to keep the location private.
Was that crack in that 4-season picture,
Yeah.
was it assisted man-made?
No, that's natural. And so if they found that naturally,